Hello and welcome to another Chamber Check-in episode from Idaho's only five-star accredited chamber. Today we get to check in with Interfaith Sanctuary's Housing Services Executive Director Jodi Peterson-Stigers, and I'm going to bring her on the screen right now. Hi, Jodi.
Hi, Paul.
Thanks for carving out some time with me today.
Happy to do it. Happy to do a check-in with you.
Great. We all know the Interfaith Sanctuary. Well, some of us know what you do, and I'm excited for you to help share what's going on with the organization, helping the homeless get housed and find ways to, find new life, I guess, for lack of a better term. And before we went live, we were talking about all the different things that you and your team do and the impact that it makes on this community and the communities that are served. So before we get into that, tell us a little bit about you, Jodi. Tell us about your background and history work that led you into this type of service.
Yeah, it's definitely not a straight course for sure. I grew up in Southern California and got here in 1999. My first husband was a professional tennis player who turned pro, and he was recruited to come to Boise State for their tennis team.
Oh.
And so I found myself in Boise, Idaho. My background was in like big productions. I worked with IMG and produced big tennis events with like Andre Agassi and Pete Sampras and Bjorn Borg. So I was like this big event girl that sold sponsorships and things like that. And then when I got to Boise, Idaho, I had one child and I was pregnant with my second. And so I had to kind of figure out a way to do something. And so I started working at the Boise Co-op in marketing. I created the Boise Co-op's first marketing department. They had heard that Whole Foods was looking. And so the consultant said, you need to get a marketing person to create brand loyalty. And so like I got this cool job that actually hadn't really existed. And that's how I got introduced to Interfaith Sanctuary.
I remember you.
You do?
Downtown at the Fort Street store.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Because I was in the grocery business too.
Right. And that's why I kind of was asking you all about the distribution and everything, because I worked with so many other people. We did events and things like that at the Boise Co-op, and I had a lot of sponsorships through these organizations. So part of my job description, Ken Kavanaugh was the president at the time, and he really truly was a dynamic leader. And he was like, Jodi, I'm going to give you this advertising budget, and I want you to use this for good. I want you to take this budget and promote nonprofits, promote our local ranchers, our producers, make them brands in this community. And so like my job was really to create advertising outside of our market. And I got to meet with all the different nonprofits and help promote their events. And I got to help create events to raise funds for, it was extraordinary experience. And in the time that I was at Boise Co-op, they were just founding Interfaith Sanctuary.
Oh.
It was a response to a crisis, and a Boise State professor knew Ken and said, hey, can we use your marketing girl to help us do a fundraiser to help, get this nonprofit going? And so I worked with the first group of students to create the Helping Hands Fund for Interfaith Sanctuary that is still to this day at the cash registers.
Oh,
like
cool.
You can donate to Interfaith. I know, it's crazy. And it's like years ago now. And then like I learned more and more about Interfaith. So life kind of happened. Like my mom got really sick. I ended up like having to leave full-time work to be able to travel back and forth to California. So I kept working with the co-op as a contract. I started my own little agency. And then Interfaith Sanctuary became one of those contracts too. And I helped to do some fundraising and some programming for them. And then my mom died, and a year later, my dad had a psychotic break. And so, so for 7 years, I was kind of navigating, doing work within these accounts, but mostly kind of in turmoil, trying to manage mental health for my father and keep him safe. And that is really how I ended up where I am today, because once he passed away, I had learned so much about So this is mental health. And this is what happens when someone they're not able to get the right access or support. And my dad had a home, and I have two older sisters, and he had an extended health care. Like, he had what he needed to get better, but it was still very difficult. And he ended up dying from his mental health, like it took his life.
Wow, Jodi.
Came back home, I started to obviously see this population that was unhoused very differently. Like, my God, people are asking things of them while they're out on the street with no support, no services. How are they supposed to get stable and better? And so I kind of dedicated myself to taking what I'd learned and moving it and bringing resources to this unhoused population. And do you remember Tent City and Cooper Court, Allie? So I became the volunteer executive director of the alley. And I know it was crazy, but it was like the timing was so interesting. I had been taking care of my dad for 7 years, and I didn't know how to stop taking care of him. Like, it was so much the grieving of not having him. And I had all this information and all this care that I needed to give. And like, suddenly there was a population that I felt I could really serve well because of the hard lessons I had just learned. And they trusted me, and I was able to get agencies to come and support the work. And, eventually it got disbanded, and, it was a messy time for the city and for homelessness. But the executive director of Interfaith Sanctuary was kind of moving on, and the board came to me and said, hey, why don't you teach us what you learned, and why don't you bring that to our shelter? And so that's how I ended up like doing this work that really I'm not trained for, but I'm perfectly trained for.
That makes the best leader right there.
Exactly. Like, you learn, it's survival, and then like, oh, this is a good thing to move forward. And so it's the greatest job I've ever had. I love it so much. It surprises me every day.
Jodi, thanks for bringing us up to speed. Obviously, our community wants to support businesses. We want to support the vibrancy downtown, and supporting our homeless population is a challenge in all cities across the world. I would say, because it's just a couple bad decisions or choices or some things that may not be in your control, like you're talking about mental illness. I see it all over the board. And we want to grow correctly. We want to grow smart. And just like Mayor says, we want a city for all. So, and welcoming to all. So tell us a little bit about the origin story of Interfaith Sanctuary. You mentioned that your kind of story and how you got involved, but
Yeah.
Help me understand how the organization was even started.
Yeah, it was a response to a crisis. There had been a different homeless shelter that was located downtown that was called Community House. It was a partnership between the city of Boise and a nonprofit called Community House. And things kind of blew up, and it was determined that like that was going to be shut down. And overnight, it became a men's only shelter, which is now Boise Rescue Mission's River of Life. And in that transition, the families with children and women who had been staying at Community House were then unhoused, and there was nowhere for them to go. And so there was kind of a crisis on the street of people trying to figure out where to be. And it was a very cold time of year. And a group of interfaith leaders saw this crisis. There was some loss of life and things like that. And they were like, well, we have got to do something. And so they met, and it was like within 2 weeks, they had created what is now Interfaith Sanctuary, but it was a moving shelter. It went from church to church. It was seasonal only. It just operated during the coldest times of the year. And it was just led by congregations. It was led by the leaders, but supported by the congregations in a very volunteer-based, loving way. But the need was greater than what those churches could do. So then it was determined we need to raise money to get a building, and the shelter needs to be more than just seasonal. And so that's that building that is currently the emergency shelter, was purchased in 2007, and we've been there ever since.
Okay.
And so it
And you're
became,
right downtown on River and 15th or 16th.
yes, Americana and
Yep.
River, exactly.
Yep.
And then since 2020, we've had a second shelter location. When COVID hit, the Red Lion became our hotel shelter.
That's right.
So we served families with children on one side of the downtown facility and then men and women on the other. When COVID hit, we moved all families with children to the hotel, and we moved our seniors and our most medically fragile. And that programming has lived in the hotel since. And so right now, this emergency shelter caters to about 170 men and women each night. And then we have another 100 beds at the Red Lion. And that is specifically for respite, home health, hospice, and families with children.
How's capacity? Do we need more service?
We're at capacity every night. We've been over capacity at the downtown emergency shelter, which is very unusual, but not because it's been so hot and so smoky. This time of year, you do kind of see a little bit of break in need because people do find it easier to be safe outside, but not this summer. And so our numbers have never softened all summer long. We've not been able to serve everyone who's come to our shelter door. About 10 or 15 we can't fit in, which is very difficult. Definitely put a lot of pressure on our operations budget, because normally when you have those numbers go down, then, cost of service goes down too. So we had to do kind of like an emergency fundraiser this summer to make sure that we could keep going, because you have to get to that season of giving again. And so it's been pretty fraught. Need is high.
Jodi, tell us a little bit about, help me share the 30,000 foot view of services that are offered.
Okay, so at our emergency shelter, we have an on-site recovery program called Project Recovery. And then we have a mental health program called Project Wellbeing. These are 7-day a week, 24 hours a day, where we do on-site programming to create support and services for those who are looking to get into recovery or to maintain or manage their mental health issues. It's robust programming, amazing. We have 2 amazing directors who have created such innovative programming. So the mental health program, it's support groups. It's a lot of resources that come in from our community to bring like mindfulness, wellness, yoga, and just like really good emotional management, all kinds of things that like we couldn't afford to have all those experts under our roof. But with our umbrella, they come in and they deliver just really significant programming. And then we see the value of like art and music and writing. And so within well-being, we have a newspaper called Word on the Street where our guests, and even those in the unhoused population can come to an editorial meeting every Tuesday. They share their words, their stories, their poetry, their photographs, their art, and it's a really great way for them to find their voices again. We have a lot of people who are transitioning, they will boldly tell their stories in this paper, and they, for some reason, feel safe because it's a beautiful community. And then we have the Homeless Art Collective, where every Tuesday morning from 9:30 to 11, anyone who needs access to art materials to do art for therapy, they might be artists, they might want to be artists, they can come in and we raise funds and work with local, businesses to get donations of paints and frames and jewelry and clothes and stuff. And we have a lot of fun with that. And it really does, it makes a big difference. That being the first connection for some people. Like, we had this amazing thing happen on Tuesday where there was a gentleman that was new to the homeless community. He was 32 years old. I can't say his name, but he had a fantastic name. And he came through the door saying, "What is this?" And I explained, like, right now we're in the editorial meeting, but we do art here and stuff. And he said, "I've only been homeless for 2 days. My family kicked me out because I'm gay, and they actually put a protection order. They don't want me anywhere near them." He said, "My heart feels broken. I can't breathe." And he's like, "And I have these dirty clothes." And we have this program called the Street Chic Boutique. It's like high-end donations that allow us to help like style guests for when they're going to like job interviews and things like that. And he's like, I really need an outfit. So one of our other guests, who is one of the stylists, he took him under his wing and he got him an outfit and he got a shower and he sat down in that editorial meeting. And when he introduced himself to everyone, he's like, I thought my heart was broken, but now I feel it healing. And he's like, I know, it was so incredible. And it's like, it's hard to imagine, why would you have art or this or that? It's because people need a safe way to enter into something so scary as homelessness, or admitting that they need help with recovery, or being able to talk about their mental health. And that's what I think we've really done a great job at, is just this welcoming, flowing kind of programming where everyone is welcome.
I see lines pretty much every morning out the front door, my commute to work, and help me understand, help me share. So you're a guest, or you're a potential guest. You can come in, you get tell me about the day in the life of the Interfaith Sanctuary.
Okay, so and this is an important, there's distinctions. So like let's be at the emergency shelter right now, because the emergency shelter is an urgent overnight shelter serving men and women. And so we're serving 170 people in a 10,000 square foot warehouse that has no kitchen.
Oh my gosh.
And it has very few bathrooms. So during the day, the only people who can stay in our shelter by day are those who are in our programs. And those programs include recovery, well-being, and our food service training program. Then we have seniors and medically fragile who didn't qualify for the hotel, but there's no way they can be out on the street. We have a medical program for them. So we have about 40 people that are going to be inside the building all day. Everyone else has to leave. We don't have capacity. And so we serve breakfast in the morning. And then that population is really forced to navigate all day long. You know, Corpus Christi, a perfect partnership. Like, they're the day shelter to our night shelter. So we work really closely together, but there is not a lot of places to go when you're homeless. And our shelter currently does not have the ability to be that wonderful 24/7 kind of care.
Okay.
The hotel shelter, on the other hand, those are private rooms where families with children, medically fragile, and seniors, they have a place to be all day and all night if they want to. They can go and come, they can go to work, that whatever it is, but they do have this safe space to call their temporary home. And so their quality of life is much better. Their consistent care, their consistent access, like, it's really shocking to see the difference between our two operations, which is why we're building the new shelter, because the new shelter will be a 24/7 shelter. Everyone who stays in that shelter, it's a 42,500 square foot shelter.
Wow.
That has a adult campus and a family with children. And so a lot of lessons have been learned, quite honestly, from having the opportunity to kind of run this hotel program when there was a crisis, and then seeing like, oh my gosh, look at what happens when you serve this way. It's significantly different.
Wow, that's a good segue into, you're in the middle of a capital campaign. And let's tell us about a couple things. How can the business community help? And then tell us a little bit about your capital campaign, and help me share when the completion and ready to go into the new space.
Okay, so here's the update. So just so you know, when we originally started this project of building the shelter on State Street, the budget was about 5.6 million, and that actually included the purchase of the building, which we bought for 2 million. But then, as you know, things got a little bumpy. It went through a lot of processes and hearings, and the design had to change significantly for the application to be approved. So I'm now building a $15.6 million shelter, which is quite a bit different than what we had originally anticipated. But I will say, there was a lot of lean in, there was a lot of eyes. This is going to be a state-of-the-art shelter that will provide safety and shelter. It's going to be a work of art, but not without a very high price tag. And so fortunately. I've raised about 9.6 million of the 15.6. A amazing local bank. Well, they're actually regional, but their local branch, Heritage Bank, came and they were the ones who said, this is not an easy loan to do, but we're going to figure out how to do it. And in April, we started construction finally on this building because of their bravery. And we are flying now. And so the anticipated completion of the new shelter is September of 2025, which
wow.
is, I know, it's really right around the corner. So that's exciting. We are so lucky, or I tell stories well, or the world is a funny place, but we, in the last few months, have gotten 3 $1 million donations.
Wow.
One was working very closely with the J.A. and Catherine Albertson Foundation, and we were finally able to come up with Movement Forward and did get $1 million. And then we had an anonymous donor who actually came to us after seeing our mural as he was coming off the connector and wanted to learn more about the shelter because he had this major event that was going to happen with some funding, and he and his wife wanted to look at where could we put the money. And so he's going to give money to all these different organizations. And we had this amazing meeting, and he ended up giving us the whole $1 million.
Wow.
So gave us $1 million. And then Tom and Mary Tomlinson Foundation, Family Foundation, they just gave us $1 million match. So that's starting right now.
Wow.
If businesses wanted to get involved right now, we're putting up that donor page, and dollar for dollar, your donation will be matched. And that's a good way for if you want your name on the building, if you want to sponsor a room, we have family, really great ways. And this is really going to be a game changer for our community. And it will take all of the community, the businesses and our individual donors to help make it happen. But it will be a gem, and it will do the right thing for the right people.
Yeah, it's a solution. Jodi, thank you. You and your team, you can't do it alone. You've got an amazing team, and just spend a couple minutes talking about your team, and then let's talk about your partnerships with College of Western Idaho.
Okay. So my team, it's really funny. One of the things that scares them most is not the fact that they work in a homeless shelter. It's when I email that I have an idea. Because I'm kind of an idea girl. But I do bring, I do like to innovate, and I do like to learn from our guests. And then I like to see what we can do. And I bring these ideas to this team, and they turn it into project recovery, project well-being, the food service training program, the word on the street. It is this group, and they are trained. They're trained as case managers and social workers, but they work so far outside of their lines. They are so brave. They have the biggest hearts in the world. I don't know how I got so lucky, but it's almost like working with a cast of superheroes. They're also silly. They're so gifted, and they're so willing to emotionally invest in very hard stories on a regular basis. And that is hard because we know our guests really well because of the programs we do. We sit with them, we talk, we go through their highs and their lows, and we lose guests. There's bad drugs out there, there's overdoses, there's suicide. It's not easy, but this group shows up every day, and they're amazing. So I could go on and on. And that's, the guests and my staff are what keep me waking up every morning and trying to figure out how to keep doing it. How do I get more money? How do I do this? And then our newest program, which I think is such a game changer, is the Idaho Workforce Development Council funded a partnership with College of Western Idaho and Interfaith Sanctuary to bring an instructor to our shelter to do what's called the Career Launcher Apprenticeship Certification. And it's a construction class that happens on site in our classroom. And the instructor at 4 weeks, 3 days a week, 3 hours a day, gets them certified to be employable within the construction industry. And they're building, it's crazy. And the reason why they did this is because there is such a massive gap in labor force for construction. And so they're like, we'll invest in your population. We hear they want to go back to work, so let's help them. And so we're just going into our third session. We've had 2 graduating classes, 4 people employed of the 8 people, which is staggering within this, like crazy. It's crazy what's happening with this program. And for this particular, the last class, we have our gala coming up on September 18th, and they have to complete an assignment for the graduation. So they each made an Adirondack chair.
Oh,
And they're being
cool.
auctioned off at the gala to help raise funds. And actually, the gala is an award ceremony. And the 3 partners, CWI, Micron Foundation, and the Idaho Workforce Development Council, are being honored as Collaboration of the Year for this tremendous program.
Okay. And is that called the Fred Awards?
It's the Fred Awards.
Okay.
It is. Right. Fred was, did you know Fred Cornforth?
No.
He was this amazing man who died of brain cancer in March. And the Fred Awards are to honor people who share the same characteristics as Fred. Fearlessness, resilience, empathy, and dynamic.
I love it.
Yeah.
I see that it's sold out. Can businesses?
It is.
Okay, it's sold out. All right.
It is sold out, happily. That's never a bad thing.
Yeah, I'll point out that all of our members are some Heritage Bank, College Western Idaho, Treasure Valley Y, Micron Foundation, Idaho Workforce Development Council. Good job, Jodi.
Yeah.
Hey, we don't have much more time, and I know you and I could talk for a long time. I want to know a couple more things. Okay. How else can we contribute to the capital campaign?
You can go right to our website and click on donate here, and your match, the matching donation will start. We'll have it up by tomorrow, and then everything's matched until we hit $1 million.
Okay. And then we drive by the bridge, and that's my commute, and my kids are in the car, and there's cardboard signs. How best do we interact?
You roll down the window, you say, hi, how's your day going? If you have a little bit of loose change or a dollar bill, don't assume it's for a beer. It's maybe to pay for their cell phone bill, or it might be to try and go and get the medication that's no longer covered by their insurance. Like, we often assume the worst stories about everyone, and we don't want to teach our kids that. We want to be compassionate. The most important thing is looking at them in the eye and saying hello instead of averting your gaze. And just seeing if they're okay. That's it. That means the world.
Love it, Jodi. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
We'll see you soon. Appreciate your time. Thanks to you and your entire team for the work you do.
Thank you so much. And thank you to the Chamber. We love you.
Absolutely. Hey, remember, next week we get to feature the Idaho employment lawyers and see what's going on with them. Remember to tune in to YouTube, like and share from our social channels. Have a great rest of your week. Jodi, say hello to the team.
I will. Thanks, Paul.